Oh, well, let's find out. Here's Nick Freeman. He's top lawyer on this front. Nick, what's your take on mopeds, and do you think that the authorities look upon them differently than other vehicles on the road?
Good evening, Eamon.
Good evening.
Good evening, Kate. Look, you can drive a 50cc motorcycle if you're 16 years of age. You wear a helmet. You still have to have the vehicle registered in the registered keeper's name. So one of the immediate problems is that there's no police on the street to enforce any criminal offences. And so if they commit an offence, and you've referred to this sort of new Instagram craze of knocking cyclists off with a moped, they're wearing helmets, so there's no real possibility, unless they're detained in situ, of identifying them. And so they really get away scot-free. So they certainly have a much easier time than motorists, and the very essence, of course, of a 50cc motorcycle is it's going to be a young person who's driving it, a 16-year-old. If they're 17, they can drive up to a 125cc motorcycle. They still have to have a provisional license, and the vehicle has to be legal, and they have to do a compulsory basic training test, which is fairly basic, and they're given a certificate at the end of it. So they do have unquestionably a much easier time. And from an identification perspective, they wear helmets, so we don't get any facial recognition. Yeah. If we don't have police on our streets, there is no means of bringing these people to justice. And if we did have police on the streets, I would suggest that the law should be changed so that these people, these culprits, carry their documents. They're made to carry their documents with them. And unless they're able to satisfy the police who they are and that they are legally entitled to drive and haven't committed an offence, that motorcycle, that moped, is seized immediately. It's automatically confiscated.
Nick, do you not think it's a bit odd that you get all these takeaway companies and Deliveroos and whatever, and they have all these drivers, and they all ride on L plates? Do you not think there's something strange about that from an insurance perspective?
Well, none of them have taken tests, so they're taking advantage of the current legal situation, which means, provided that they fall within the right age and the right CC bracket of the moped, they can drive under a provisional license. They're not taking tests. They don't want the expense, and so the law enables them to do that.
But it's the hire and reward business that gets me, because if I was on my own in a Fiat Uno, I don't think do a delivery for hire and reward under my insurance.
Under an L plate, you couldn't, definitely.
Well, the insurance would be massive, because it would be commercial insurance, wouldn't it?
It would.
So it will be that much higher. And, of course, the way... these people aren't actually employees, are they? I think they're self-employed.
And also, if they are riding a bike that belongs to a restaurant chain and something goes wrong and the police identify the bike, how do you relate the driver back to the bike? You can't prove that it was that particular person riding the bike, can you?
Are we talking about mopeds now, or cycles?
Oh, mopeds.
If it's mopeds, well, what would happen is there will be a notice sent to the registered keeper, because they do have to have a number plate on. So the notice will go to the registered keeper of the moped, and that person has a legal obligation to furnish information. And if they don't do that, then they're liable for conviction. They get 6 penalty points or disqualification. But if these moped drivers are involved in serious accidents, that punishment isn't going to be a serious deterrent. When we're talking about moped drivers knocking off cyclists, what we need to have is a law in place whereby the penalty for not providing the information as to who was driving is the same as the substantive offence. So there's no incentive. If someone knocks a cyclist off and causes him serious injury, and he then gets, within 14 days through the post, a document saying who was your vehicle was involved in an incident, you're the registered keeper, who was driving, and he ignores it, at the moment he's going to be prosecuted for failing to furnish information.
So it's the employer who's prosecuted, Nick, rather than the person driving the motorbike?
It will go to the registered keeper.
So therefore, someone like Uber Eats could have a complete cowboy driving for them, and that cowboy could possibly never be found or charged or penalised.
Well, what would happen is, if without naming any particular companies, if all the vehicles were... I don't know whether these vehicles are registered to the company or whether they're registered to the individual. I don't know. But let's assume that they're registered to the company. They go to the company, the company nominate X. X then receives a notice asking him to confirm he was a driver. if X doesn't confirm he was the driver, he will simply be prosecuted for failing to give information, unless the police have other evidence to show that he committed potentially a very serious offence. You know, if somebody causes a serious injury, he could be charged with, grievous bodily harm, which carries a maximum of life imprisonment. So where's the incentive to say, oh, yes, it was me who was riding the helmeted motorcycle that caused this guy to have brain damage? He's not going to do it. And that's the problem.
Well, it's a serious issue, one of many problems. Nick, thanks for highlighting those. Really appreciate you raising the questions there. Nick Freeman is a lawyer, and he specialises in sort of traffic situations. So there we are.